This is a reading from the Virgin Mary in the writings of Maria Valtorta by Father Gabriel M. Roschini, O.S.M. Declaration by Father Gabriel M. Roschini. I have been studying, teaching, preaching, and writing Mariology for half a century already. The first non-exhaustive biography of Father Roschini's writings appeared in Marianum, number 123, 1979. It listed 920 titles. 790 of these were articles and other writings, forwards, etc., in various periodicals or works. Many book reviews are not included in this bibliography. The other 130 titles represent books, 66 of which are rather large, 200-page or more. 29 of these books are series of 2, 3, or 4 volumes. All of these works belong to different genres: didactic, literary, critical, historical, and deal with subjects from several fields: theology, philosophy, exegesis, spirituality, history, including 23 biographical monographs, etc. The greater part of Father Roschini's work is dedicated to Mariology. Some titles are Mariology, Introduction and Mariological Summa, Volume 1 to 4, 1947 to 48. The Virgin Mary According to the Faith and Theology, Volumes 1 to 4, 1953 to 1954. Dictionary of Mariology, 517 pages, 1960. Il tutto santo e la tutta santa, The Relationship Between the Virgin Mary and the Holy Spirit, Volumes 1 and 2, 1976 to 1977. Other, shorter works went through several editions and translations in various languages. God's Masterpiece, 178 pages, 1933. Who is Mary? An Advanced Catechism of the Blessed Virgin, New York, Society of St. Paul, translated in 1950, 64 pages. Marian Instructions, 383 pages, 1945. Life of Mary, 373 pages, 1945. Several other works pertain to various current Mariological issues. For instance, The Dogma of the Assumption, 311 pages, 1950. The Perpetual Virginity of Mary, 154 pages, 1968. The Problematic of Co-Redemption, 150 pages, 1969. Mary's Mediation Today, 114 pages, 1971. Some of Father Roschini's university courses in Rome were also published, as well as several of his radio conferences on the Vatican radio station. Publisher, Colby's. Now we continue with what Father Gabriel is saying. I have been studying, teaching, preaching, and writing Mariology for half a century already. To do this, I had to read innumerable works and articles of all kinds on Mary, a real Marian library. I feel, however, that I must candidly admit that the Mariology found in all of Maria Valtorta's writings, both published and unpublished, has been a real discovery for me. No other Marian writings, not even the sum total of everything I have read and studied, were able to give me as clear, as lively, as complete, as luminous, or as fascinating an image, both simple and sublime, of Mary, God's masterpiece. It seems to me that the conventional image of the Blessed Virgin, portrayed by myself and my fellow Mariologists, is merely a papier-mâché Madonna compared to the living and vibrant Virgin Mary envisioned by Maria Valtorta, a Virgin Mary perfect in every way. For this fundamental reason, in order to present the Mariology of Valtorta's writings, I have chosen to let Maria Valtorta speak for herself and limit my own initiative to coordinating everything she wrote in various texts in her incomparable way. Some might see this procedure as a fault. I see it rather as an enrichment. It is good to know, moreover, that I did not spontaneously admire Maria Valtorta. At first, I was one of those who, without first-hand knowledge of her writings, was content to sneer at them. After reading and studying them, I had, like many others, to be fair, recognized that I had been too rash, and come to the conclusion that whoever wants to know the Blessed Virgin, a virgin in perfect harmony with the Holy Scriptures, the tradition of the Church, and the Church magisterium should draw from Valtorta's Mariology. If anyone believes my declaration is only one of those ordinary hyperbolic slogans abused by publicity, I will say this only: let them read before they judge. Footnote 2. That was, in essence, Pope Pius XII's recommendation to 3 members of the Order of the Servants of Mary: Father Andrea M. Cecchin, prior, and Father Corrado M. Berti, and Father Romualdo M. Migliorini, theologians, during their special audience on February 26, 1948. See the Osservatore Romano, February 27, 1948. Publish this work as is. There is no need to give an opinion on its origin, whether it be extraordinary or not. Whoever reads it will understand. Publisher, Colby's. Gabriel M. Roschini, O.S.M. Publisher's note. In the second Italian edition, 1986. Born in Castel Sant'Elia, Viterbo, Italy, in 1900, Alessandro Roschini changed his name to Gabriele Maria when he entered the Order of the Servants of Mary at an early age. He was ordained a priest in 1924. As a doctor in philosophy and master in sacred theology, Father Roschini devoted his entire life to serve Mary, loving her with deep piety. He helped others to know her with his preaching, uninterrupted teaching for over 50 years, fundamental Mariological research, and numerous publications. In 1939, Father Roschini founded the international periodical Marianum, which he directed for 30 years. In 1950, he founded the Marianum Theological Faculty in Rome and was its rector for the first 15 years. Footnote: Marianum was the first faculty of its kind in the Church. It is now a pontifical institute. The contents of footnotes 3, 5, and 6 in the present publisher's note are taken from the first Italian edition's publisher's note, written on December the 8th, 1973, by Emilio Pisani, editor. We also owe to him the rebirth of the Marian Library. With Pius XII's approval in 1946, it was transferred to the International College of St. Alexis Falconieri, which was to house the faculty. Father Roschini also assumed important functions within both his order and a few dicasteries of the Roman Curia. Father Roschini's first encounter with the writings of Maria Valtorta is documented in the declaration which he made in Rome on August 27, 1946. Upon the Most Reverend General Father's request, I have reviewed Volume 1 of the work. It could be entitled A Footnote to the Gospel, since it begins with the conception of the Most Blessed Virgin Mary and ends just before our Lord Jesus Christ's public ministry. I have found nothing in it against faith or morals. Instead, I have found the breadth of a great spirituality and a most exceptional capacity to reconstruct the gospel scenes. Permission for publication may therefore be granted on the following conditions. 1. Explicitly declare that only human faith can be put in what is recounted, and that it is only a human reconstruction. 2. Omit everything that, explicitly or to all practical purposes, claims that the work has a divine origin. The latter is not beyond doubt on account of some hints to the contrary. 3. Do all the previously mentioned corrections and those recommended by prudence, etc. Footnote 4. In 1946, Father Roschini's attitude was still bureaucratically non-committal. As regards the second point he then made, it is interesting to note Pope Pius XII's decision. In the 1948 audience mentioned in Note 2, Pius XII said to publish Maria Valtorta's work as is. When he was specifically asked whether the mentions of visions or dictations were to be omitted, he said not to omit anything. Editor. In 1949, Father Roschini paid a courtesy call to the bedridden writer in her house in Viareggio, but did not seem to be moved in the least. Back in Rome, he kept in touch with various colleagues seeking to publish Maria Valtorta's work. These were Father Romualdo M. Migliorini, who died in 1953, and Father Corrado M. Berti, as they met with opposition. Father Roschini sometimes advised them, remembering the good business relation which Alexis M. Cardinal L'Épicier, O.S.M., whose memory he revered, had had with our publishing and printing house. He directed Father Berti to us. His bogged-down publication project was put on track again. The work of Maria Valtorta was finally published in 4 large volumes. Father Roschini's relationship with us was increasingly cordial and trusting. Whenever he could, he would gladly entrust us with the printing of his books. He never failed to ask about the progress of Maria Valtorta's writings, of which the revised 10-volume edition was being published at the time. He always expressed moderate satisfaction. One afternoon of August 1972, he rang the bell at Valtorta's house in Viareggio. He was dropping by unexpectedly to see Marta di Ciotti, who survived Maria and looked after the house. By a happy coincidence, my wife and I were spending a few days at Marta's at the time. Astounded, we welcomed him. He was returning from his yearly holidays, which he always spent at the Servites Monastery in Pietralba in the Dolomite Alps. This time he had spent all his time, even many hours at night, reading Valtorta's voluminous work. He had been won over. He was touched. With edifying humility, he begged pardon for his previous distrust and signed the guest book, expressing his devotion and admiration. Already he was planning to study and spread Maria Valtorta's writings. He was to devote to them the latest classes of his course, the Marian institutions of great mystics, to be given a few months later at the Marianum. Footnote 5. The present book resulted from these lectures. Father Gabriel M. Roschini was also a professor at the Pontifical Lateran University. At this time, the civil and ecclesiastic authorizations necessary for Maria Valtorta's privileged burial were granted. It was to take place on July 2nd, 1973, the then Marian feast day of the Visitation. On that day, Father Roschini himself, as priest, accompanied Maria Valtorta's mortal remains during their private translation from Viareggio to Florence. He said Mass, which was concelebrated, preached an appropriate sermon, and gave the blessing for the burial in the chapel of the chapter at the great cloister of the Santissima Annunziata Basilica. On December the 8th, 1973, he returned with us to the crowd gathered for an official celebration of the July 2nd event. He presented his book, La Madonna negli scritti di Maria Valtorta. He was at the height of his activities, professor at the Lateran Pontifical University and at the Marianum, Pontifical Theological Faculty, advisor for the Sacred Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith and for the Sacred Congregation for the Causes of the Saints. Footnote 6. Father Gabriel M. Roschini was also at some time Prior General of the Order of the Servants of Mary, Vicar General, and General Director of its studies. He was also a member of several scholarly academies and Vice President of the Pontifical Academy of Our Lady Immaculate. In 1965, the Italian government bestowed on him the Gold Medal for cultural, literary, and artistic merit. He died in Rome on September the 12th, 1977, the day dedicated to the name of Mary. Within a few months, an unrelenting ailment had broken his strong constitution. I had seen him again, exhausted with suffering, on a bed in the Salvator Mundi clinic. I was unable to understand anything he said, but his usual greeting, "Dear Pisani." 4 years had gone by since the day when, having passed the proofs of the present book's first Italian edition, he read to me his foreword before entrusting it to me with near solemnity. It was the most courageous deed of his life. Emilio Pisani, Isola dei Liri, May 1986. Translator's note. I have decided to quote the Bible from the Douay Challoner translation, since it does not stray from the truly Catholic traditional exegesis followed by Father Roschini. All quotations have the these and thous and the like replaced by their modern equivalents. The passage from Tobit, chapter 13, verses 13 to 16, caused special problems, however. This is because the various extant manuscripts of the original Greek text of the Book of Tobit differ in several instances, and each translator must choose among the textual variants. Now, the Douay version is not based on the same textual variants as the Italian version, which Father Roschini quoted, since Father Roschini did an elaborate Marian commentary on the Italian text of Tobit, chapter 13, verses 13 to 16, which he chose. I had to have an English text based on the same Greek textual variants. Since I could not find any, I had to start with the closest one I could get and edit it on the basis of the Italian translation, while keeping an eye on a critical edition of the Greek Septuagint with all the textual variants in Greek. Unfortunately, the closest English text I found was that of the Jerusalem Bible. I say unfortunately because it seems to me that the Jerusalem Bible has been affected by the type of modernist thinking which was condemned by Pope Pius X in 1907. This, in turn, leads me to question the choice of variants by the Italian editors of the Bible quoted by Father Roschini. Although Father Roschini gives a truly edifying commentary on the version he did choose, however, had he followed a traditional translation based on the Vulgate, such as Douay, he would have achieved two goals. One, he would have had an even richer text to expound on, a text even more Marian than the one he chose. Two, he would have been more in line with Maria Valtorta's own writings, since in at least two passages, when Tobit is quoted, a text very similar to that of the Vulgate is used. These texts of Valtorta's are quoted on page 302 to 303 and 193 of the present book. Passages from volumes 1 to 5 and most of volume 6 of Maria Valtorta's Poema dell'Uomo Dio are quoted from the corresponding volumes 1, 2, and 3 of the English translation. I have touched them up in various places. The corrections, or adaptations, mostly of Britishisms, are enclosed in curly brackets like these. Show the curly brackets. These ones. The quotations from volumes 1, 2, and 3 also have some editorial changes, mostly by Father Roschini. These are enclosed in square brackets like these. Right there. Elsewhere in the book, square brackets indicate editorial additions or changes, either by Father Roschini or myself. All other passages from Maria Valtorta have been provisionally translated for the needs of the present publication. Whenever Father Roschini quotes authors other than Maria Valtorta, I have made use, wherever possible, of the existing English translations and have referred to these in bibliographical quotes. Other authors quoted by Father Roschini may have quoted from translations of the Bible other than Douay. Paul T. Y. Atworth. Introduction. The importance of mystics for Mariology. Marian doctrine, as found in the revelations of the Church's great mystics, is still mostly unexplored territory. This constitutes a serious omission for Mariology. We can find in the private revelations of great mystics many valuable elements for the construction of the Mariological building. There is enough to elaborate a Mariology according to the great mystics, a Mariology which would be new or renewed in several respects, fresh, attractive, and full of vitality. Our great mystics, as well as their writings, must not be underestimated. God our Father speaks to us through the prophets, through Christ his Son, infinite wisdom, incarnate word, through the apostles and the evangelists in the canonical writings, through the Church and its visible head, the Roman Pontiff, and the doctors of the Church. Moreover, he speaks to us through mystics. Mystics are those people whom God has enriched with extraordinary gifts, which are known as charismata. These charismata are graces granted over and above the merits of individuals for the sake of the salvation of others. Through these mystics, God not only reveals himself and his ineffable mysteries, he also speaks to us about his most holy Mother, her incomparable dignity, her unique mission, and her singular privileges. Who are these mystics through whom God has told us about the Blessed Virgin? There are many of them, more than I can deal with. I have, therefore, decided to limit myself to female mystics, beginning with one of the greatest contemporary mystics, Maria Valtorta. 2. The Life and Writings of Maria Valtorta. Before I develop the Marian intuitions found in the mystical writings of Maria Valtorta, here is, as an introduction, a brief presentation of her life and work. 1. Her life. Her exceptional, richly talented personality comes to life for us with all her qualities and faults in her novel-like autobiographia. Her life may be divided into 2 stages, from her birth to the paralysis of her legs, which disabled her at the age of 37, from the time of her paralysis, which left her bedridden, until her death, 27 years later. First stage, 1897 to 1934. Maria Valtorta was born on March the 14th, 1897, at Caserta, where her father, chief adjutant of the cavalry, was temporarily stationed. Doctors had expected her to have been stillborn. Her mother, an educated but harsh woman, reacted as though the child was not born to her. She hired a wet nurse. Maria was 18 months old when her family moved to Faenza. A year and a half later, in September 1901, the family relocated in Milan. There, Maria, a little over 4, started attending a kindergarten run by Ursuline sisters. There she wrote, "I met the face of God and His love," Autobiographia, page 22, "and I never let go of Him," Ibid, page 24. By the age of 7, in October 1904, Maria had entered the Institute of Marcelline Sisters to begin her elementary education. On May 30th, 1905, she received the sacrament of confirmation at the hands of the servant of God, Cardinal Ferrari. It was, she said, my Pentecost. Ibid, page 25. Her family moved to Voghera in September 1907. Maria made her first communion when she was 10, on October the 5th, 1908. On that day, her fusion with Jesus became perfect. Ibid, page 72. On May the 1st, 1909, at the age of 12, she entered a boarding school in Monza, run by the Sisters of St. Bartolomeo Capitano. During her 4-year stay, there were 5 school years. During her 4-year stay there, 5 school years, she was held up to all as a role model and was received into the congregation of the Daughters of Mary. In 1911, she obtained her diploma in technical studies. During the next 2 years, she did supplementary studies in literature and the history of various countries. The Valtortas again moved on March the 1st, 1913, this time to Florence. Maria was almost 16. Her lifestyle remained like that of her boarding school. Twice, in 1914 and 1919 respectively, her mother, for selfish reasons, mercilessly and brutally broke up Maria's engagements with 2 fine young men. From early November 1917 until the summer of 1920, Maria generously sacrificed her time in war hospitals with the Samaritan nurses. There, she caught a violent Spanish flu. After she had recovered from the flu, in September 1920, her cousin Belfanti invited her to Reggio in Calabria. Almost 2 years later, in 1922, she returned to Florence. In the spring of 1923, Maria Valtorta made an initial offering of herself to God. By October of 1924, the Valtorta family had permanently established themselves in Viareggio. In Viareggio, on January 28, 1925, following the example of Saint Teresa of Lisieux, Maria offered herself as a victim to merciful love. She renewed this offering daily for the rest of her life. In December 1929, she joined Catholic Action and worked zealously for 3 years as a delegate for the culture of Catholic youth, giving numerous presentations and conferences. On July 1, 1930, Maria Valtorta offered herself as a victim to divine justice. Divine justice did not spare her. Physical and spiritual suffering began to rain on her and increased to the point where, by January the 4th, 1933, she could not leave her house. From April the 1st, 1934, until she died, that is, for 27.5 years, she was forced to remain in bed. Second stage, 1934 to 1961. As Jesus was nailed to the cross, so, for the last 27.5 years of her life, Maria Valtorta was nailed to her bed by various diseases. she found effective spiritual support in Father Romualdo Migliorini, O.S.M. On March 25, 1944, he received her in the Third Order of the Servants of Mary. At that time, she was already a secular Franciscan. It is in the second part of her life that her writings blossomed. In the spring of 1949, Maria Valtorta, to complete her preceding offerings, generously gave to God everything which was exclusively hers and which she had received from God, her intellect and the satisfaction to see her work approved. Letter to Mother Teresa Maria of St. Joseph, Discalced Carmelite, April 18, 1949. God accepted Valtorta at her word. She saw the planned publication of her writings become hindered. Then, from 1956 until her death, her mental faculties declined. She died in the morning of October the 12th, 1961, at the very moment Father Innocenzo M. Rovetti, the examiner of the Third Order of the Servants of Mary, was pronouncing the words recommending her soul. Depart from this world, O Christian soul. Obeying, as she had always done, she left the earth for heaven. People noticed that her right hand, with which she had written so many sublime texts, contrarily to her left hand, retained the color, suppleness, and beauty of someone alive rather than dead. 2. Her writings. In only 8 years, 1943 to 1951, Maria Valtorta wrote more than 15,000 pages in 122 notebooks. Even though bedridden and unable to consult useful books, she wrote during the war, which forced her evacuation and exposed her to bombings and various deprivations. She never drew up plans of what she would be writing. She never corrected her text. Her first draft was her definitive text. She seldom even reread what she had written. Footnote 7. Before describing another vision, Maria Valtorta seldom reread what she had written before. Later, however, she did proofread a typewritten copy of her writings, the D2 copy. While doing so, she added a number of enlightening comments. Editor. Her work contains descriptive scenes of what she saw and heard, and dictations by Jesus, the Blessed Virgin, and a certain angel. The stylistic differences between the descriptions and the dictations leap out from the page. We find ourselves facing an effect. Her work, which seems to be beyond its cause, Maria Valtorta. All in all, in 8 years, and under the adverse conditions described above, she wrote 17 volumes. Footnote 8. All of Maria Valtorta's writings, except for some secular writings and correspondence, are found in 122 notebooks. While most of this material has been published in Italian, relatively little has been published in English. The Italian publisher has drawn the following works from the 122 notebooks according to subject matter. A. I Poema dell'Uomo Dio, The Visions of the Lives of Jesus and Mary, First Italian edition, 1956 to 1959. Second Italian edition, 1964 to 1966. Third Italian edition, 1975. Referred to as Poema. Volume and page numbers refer to the 1975 Italian edition. Cross-references to the English translation, where applicable, are given in Appendix D. Further signs may be used when Poema is quoted. A equals handwritten manuscript, D1 equals the first typewritten copy, D2 equals the second typewritten copy. These copies were typed by Father Romualdo M. Migliorini, O.S.M. D2 was copied from D1 and not from the original manuscript. There are 2 complete copies of D2. Each has 4,162 pages. One of these was revised, touched up, and annotated by Maria Valtorta herself. She did not revise the other one, which, however, was published in Italian in 4 big volumes. This was the first Italian edition of 1956 to 1959. Of course, a new critical edition was needed. It was printed in Italian in 1964 to 1966 and reprinted in 1975. B. Autobiografia. Maria Valtorta's autobiography, written under obedience to her spiritual director, Father Migliorini, First Italian edition, 1969, Second Italian edition, revised and augmented in 1981, referred to as Autobiografia. References are to the Second Italian edition. C. Libro di Azzaria, the Book of Azariah, a comment on the liturgy of 58 feast days, published in Italian in 1972, referred to as Azaria, Italian edition. D. Lezioni sull'Epistola di Paolo ai Romani, a commentary on Paul's epistle to the Romans, 1977. Once the previous works were drawn from the 122 notebooks, the remaining miscellaneous writings were gathered in the 3 following books. I Quaderni del 1943, published in Italian in 1976. F. I Quaderni del 1944, published in Italian in 1980. And G. I Quaderni dal 1945 al 1950, published in Italian in 1984. References to one of these quaderni, an Italian word which means notebooks, are made according to the following pattern. Quaderni 43, page 636, December the 8th. That is, quad equals quaderni, followed by the year, the page number, and the date given by Maria Valtorta herself. Three, the greatest female Marian mystics. The greatest female Marian mystics in ancient and modern times are Saint Hildegard of Bingen, Benedictine, 1098 to 1179, known as the Sibyl of the Rhine. Saint Mechildis of Helfta, Saint Matilda, Cistercian, 1241 to 1299. Saint Gertrude the Great, Cistercian, 1256 to 1302, or 1309, the greatest mystic of the 13th century. Blessed Angela of Foligno, secular Franciscan, 1246 to 1309. Saint Bridget of Sweden, Birgitta, 1309 to 1373, the northern mystic. Saint Catherine of Siena, tertiary Dominican, 1347 to 1380, doctor of the Church. Saint Mary Magdalene of Pazzi, Carmelite, 1566 to 1607. Venerable Maria de Agreda, Franciscan, 1602 to 1665. Saint Veronica Giuliani, Capuchin, 1660 to 1727. Blessed Mary Magdalene Martinengo, Capuchin, 1687 to 1737. Servant of God Mary of Saint Teresa Petit, Third Order Carmelite, 1623 to 1677. Venerable Mary Archangel Biondini of the Handmaids of Mary, 1641 to 1712. Servant of God Cecil Bay, Benedictine, 1694 to 1766. Venerable Anne Catherine Emmerich, Augustinian, 1774 to 1824. Servant of God Marie Veronique of the Heart of Jesus, founder of the Institute of the Victims of the Sacred Heart of Jesus, 1825 to 1883. Guglielmina Ronconi, 1864 to 1936. Servant of God Lucia Mangano, Ursuline, 1896 to 1946. And Maria Valtorta, tertiary of the Order of Servants of Mary, 1897 to 1961. Before expounding the Marian doctrine contained in the private revelations of the great mystic Maria Valtorta, it seems good to me to do a general introduction on private revelations.